So recently I did a video on my channel called The New Most Obscene Metal Album That I Own. In this video, I focused on a gore grind band from the Netherlands called Last Days of Humanity, and this was their debut album called The Sounds of Rancid Juices Sloshing Around Your Coffin. I thought it would be kind of a cool idea to watch all 9 of the obscure movies and obscure horror movies that are featured and sampled in this album. So that's what I did. I have spent, Bubba, I'm telling you, I have spent the last 10 days or so watching 9 different movies. I even had to pay for an HBO Max subscription, girl, okay? That's how dedicated I am to this damn video, all right? That was with freaking ads, okay? $10 for a service to still get fucking ads for my movie. But that's a side note. Quick disclaimer, because I feel like I should explain this a little bit. I am super into movies right now. It's a New Year's resolution of mine to watch 100 movies this year, and I'm getting into obscure movies, and more importantly, obscure horror movies. So I am not somebody that's ever watched horror, really. I've never been. It's the same thing with metal. Originally it wasn't anything that I was really ever interested in until I actually jumped into it, and that's what I'm doing with horror now. So I'm really excited about this video. If you're new here, my name is Kaiya. Hello, hi, how are you? I hope you're doing great. I'm gonna do a short album review for this record, so if you want to just skip all of this, there's a timestamp. There'll be a timestamp. You can just get right to the movies. But if you have not heard of Last Days of Humanity, this gore grind band, like I said, from the Netherlands, you really should. If you're interested in gore grind, if you're getting into metal, if you're wanting to discover more in the extreme metal subgenres, gore grind is awesome. Look up my boys Exhumed, okay? Early Day Carcass. They're dope. Last Days of Humanity is like Mortician, but a little more raw. This album is straight up gore grind. There's no lyrics. It's tuned down vocals. It's aggressive. There's horror movie samples, just like Mortician stuff. So I highly recommend that you listen to it, or at least give it a try. A lot of the album covers and photos that Last Days of Humanity uses are of real gore photos, which is obviously fits the bill, you know. So starting at the beginning of the album will be with track 1, Born to Murder the World. Now in this song there is a movie sample right at the beginning, and it's taken from the 1995 movie Lord of Illusions, directed by Clive Barker, starring Daniel Von Bargen and Famke Janssen. Private Eye Harry D'Amour travels to Los Angeles and meets with a new client, Dorothea Swan, who reveals that she and her husband, famed magician Philip Swan, have been targeted by a religious cult experimenting with reincarnation. After Philip dies on stage in the midst of a dangerous trick, D'Amour must struggle to protect Dorothea from the ruthless cult members and their newly reanimated religious leader, Nyx. So Clive Barker is the director of this film, and he actually did another film that Last Days did sample for their album, which I will talk about later in this video. And the sample that is featured in this album is so good. It's taken from a scene towards the end of the film during the most climactic scene where our antagonist, Nyx, delivers this line that is so hard. It is absolute bars. I love the delivery of it. I'm so obsessed with it. But he basically is explaining to our protagonist, I guess, his purpose, or what he feels like his mission is in the film. And his line is, "I was born to murder the world." Here's the sample.
I should have been honest with you from the start. I wasn't born to show people the error of their ways. I was born to murder the world. I should have been honest with you from the start. I wasn't born to show people the error I was born to murder the world.
I felt like that this movie was pretty good to watch, just as like a movie to turn your brain off and just watch. Throughout the whole film, I was really questioning like who these illusionists were they just extremely talented magicians with like really crafty tricks, or are they actual like supernatural beings like a demon or something like that? There's also a really random sex scene in this film and it just kind of proves that not every film needs to have a sex scene. Like why do directors feel like they need to interject a sex scene into a film where it just doesn't add anything? It doesn't add any value. When it actually came down to like their first kiss and the actual doing of the deed, it was like so forced. The ending was definitely anticlimactic in my opinion. I think there could have been a little bit more of like a fight, like a little bit more of a back and forth in my opinion, and they could have made Nyx and his character so much more scary with so much potential, but they just didn't do that. They made him look really scary. They made him look very gross at the end, but in the beginning he was showing off so much of his talent and you just don't get that in the end. Moving on to track number 4 called Slithering Limbs, which features a sample from the 1992 film The Lawnmower Man. So this is a movie directed by Brett Leonard, who's not really known for any other movies. It's really just B-rated stuff that I was like, I don't think anybody, literally anybody, has watched. If you have, though, I applaud you, and you can let me know what those masterpieces are like. The eccentric Dr. Lawrence Angelo puts mentally disabled landscaper Job Smith on a regimen of experimental pills and computer-simulated training sequences in hopes of augmenting the man's intelligence. As he develops psychic powers, he realizes that those around him have taken advantage of his simplicity his whole life, and he plots a bloody revenge. Now, the sample used in this album is also taken from the most climactic part at the end of the movie, but it's essentially where Job is in this virtual reality universe, and he tells our protagonist that I am God here in this kind of cyber world. Here's the sample.
This universe is mine. I am God here. This universe is mine. I am God here.
There's a lot of CGI in this film, so be prepared for some bad-looking, dated, early 90s CGI. I don't blame it. I think it was really cool. I just give it the benefit of the doubt. There's a lot of really great uses for it, especially because there's kind of this mix of virtual reality mixed with the actual reality and kind of interlacing those two things together. But yeah, I think one of the most memorable parts of this film was seeing Job's transformation from being kind of this simple-minded lawnmower guy to this hyper intelligent being. It was very cool to watch him first go through some of these virtual reality tests to then just absorbing so much information and seeing that transformation from good to evil was Very, very cool. Track number 8, The Smell of the Dead, features a sample from the 1995 movie The Prophecy, directed by Gregory Wyden, starring Christopher Walken and Vigdis Mortensen. This movie is about an evil angel, Gabriel, that has come to Earth to strengthen his powers by claiming the wicked spirit of a psychotic veteran. Benevolent angel Simon wants to stop that from happening, so he hides the man's spirit where Gabriel would least expect to find it, in a little girl. Caught in a cosmic battle in which even Lucifer plays a part, a solemn cop moves heaven and earth to protect the child. The sample that is used in this album actually comes from a scene where Christopher Walken has shown up to a graveyard. You can hear his feet on the gravel and he's smelling the air. And in this scene, he says, "I can always smell a graveyard."
I can always smell a graveyard. I can always smell a graveyard.
So this movie I did find to be quite entertaining if you like good versus evil, angels versus demons type of movie. It reminded me a lot of Stephen King's behemoth of a novel, The Stand, which if you haven't read that novel, you should, but it might take you a while. It's like 1,400 pages. But it's essentially about God versus the devil, good versus evil, with this horrible disease that's killed like 90% of the population. You know, human beings are just like a casualty of this war. They're just observing this war between heaven and hell, and that's essentially what you get with this movie. So you know, you got Christopher Walken being this like evil angel. You really question his intentions throughout this movie, but there's a lot of details within this movie that were really quite interesting, like for example how the angels sit. There's a lot of scenes where Christopher Walken sitting almost like a gargoyle on top of like a chair, or like you know, on the top of a building. He looks like a gargoyle. And then also too, when you see their fingernails, they're like black and blue, but they're not painted like with nail polish. They just look almost like they're decaying. Track 15 features a sample from the 1987 film Bad Taste, directed by Peter Jackson, who also did the Lord of the Rings franchise and all of the Hobbit movies. And I'm gonna be 100% real, but I didn't know that Peter Jackson from Bad Taste was the same Peter Jackson that made the fucking Lord of the Rings series. Like, are you kidding me? So the sample that is used in this film is taken from a scene where one of our G-men is basically defending himself against these aliens. Now, these aliens are kind of similar to the ones that are in like Men in Black, where you know, that cockroach dude that basically wears the skin suit. It's kind of the same. It's exactly the same thing. So he's defending himself from these human alien looking things, and he's shooting one of these aliens, and it's just a lot of gory, gurgling, bloody noises. And that's the entire sample. So here it is. And so, yeah, obviously you can tell that this sample is it's got some extra audio, gory, gurgling audio samples. So it is quite cheesy, but that I think is the point, you know? Just for added effect, for that gurgling, gory kind of sound. And I thought it worked. I thought it was fun. You see a lot of that in this movie. Now, I will say bad taste is definitely a kind of gore comedy horror. So there is going to be some gore stuff. There's going to be some like guts and blood and things of that nature. So if you're a little bit more on the squeamish side, you may want to skip this one. But it's totally up to you. The story is quite simply good. This honestly reminded me of Trailer Park Boys. If you've seen Trailer Park Boys on Netflix, it's, you know, got that kind of hilarity to it. The G-men that you're following are both very silly and do stupid things, but they're also like total badasses, you know, and like even the aliens themselves are kind of dumb and silly and do weird, funny things. And I just think the whole concept of them like harvesting humans for their intergalactic fast food chain is really funny. And it was cool too because after I looked at the cast of the film, one of the main characters, Derek, is actually played by Peter Jackson, which was really cool because he turns out to be one of the more essential characters in the film, especially towards the end. So the one thing I wish that they explained more of is how Derek survived what he did. Track 17 features the 1990 film Cat in the Brain, which is directed by Lucio Fulci, who is a famous and renowned Italian horror movie director. His most notable works include the horror western series Zombie, as well as Don't Torture a Duckling and The Psychic. Cat in the Brain is about Dr. Lucio Fulci, who begins experiencing horrible visions while filming one of his gory horror movies. He then sees a psychiatrist to help him as his visions begin to worsen. But what he doesn't know is that the psychiatrist is also a serial killer. This movie was honestly one of the weirdest movies out of this entire list, and I think it's the worst one, because it's just, there's not a lot that happens. Now, I will say as like a disclaimer, I have never seen a Lucio Fulci horror movie. So this was my very first one. So if you're a fan of Lucio Fulci stuff and you haven't seen this, you would probably really like this just because it's kind of like a nod, I guess you could say, to Lucio Fulci. That's really what it is. It is literally a movie about Lucio and a montage of some of the goriest scenes from previous movies. And based on what I read, I did a little bit of research about this movie just because I was kind of curious. But there were two other movies that came out previously before this one that he actually took scenes from. And so basically like 90% of this film was made in post-production. So it's just like all scenes from previous horror movies just like slapped together into this montage of gore. The sample that's featured in this film is actually at the very, very beginning of this film, and it's basically a few cats that are eating and pawing at this giant mass of raw guts. And it's not real cats, it's definitely stuffed cats. But while this is happening, while these cats are pawing and eating these guts, Lucio Fulci is kind of muttering to himself about all of these different things that he wants to do to would-be victims. So like dismembering, and then he's talking about like, you know, chainsaw, like cutting up her from like whatever, and while he's mentioning these things, the vocals are actually being like warbled up and down, so it leaves a very interesting unsettling effect. So here's the sample.
Buried alone, sawn in two, decapitated, devouring the remains of a fool. Slashed by a ring. Killed, smashed, disfigured, pierced like butcher's hooks, tongues, fingers, toes. A woman, put to death, an axe, a face, skin, a face. Someone chopped to burn. It's buried alone, sawn in two, decapitated, devouring the remains of a fool. Slashed by a ring. Killed, smashed, disfigured, pierced like butcher's hooks, tongues. Fingers, toes. A woman.
Track 20, Excremental Carnage, features a sample from the 1988 movie The Serpent and the Rainbow, which is directed by Wes Craven. He is most notable for his Scream series, as well as the original Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984, and that blew my mind. Also, in a time of political and social unrest, anthropologist Dennis Allen travels to Haiti to study the voodoo powder that turns its victims into living zombies. The sample used in this album is actually featured at the end of the movie, of course, where the protagonist is getting revenge, let's just say, and it's pretty good. It's a pretty good scene because he definitely deserved it. It's quite satisfying.
What do you want? I want to hear you scream. No! Yes. What do you want? I want to hear you scream.
There were times where the protagonist was quite annoying because he kept returning to Haiti after so many freaking times being warned and just told to just go home. And I'm like, bub, some of the things that you've been through, like, I would never step foot back in that country ever again. And you're just willingly doing it for what? Again, I think this movie had like another kind of forced weird sex scene that we didn't need to have. Track 24, a reeking pile of septic brain fluid, features a sample from the 1988 film Brain Damage, which is directed by Frank Henenlotter, who is also known for Basket Case 1, 2, and 3, as well as Frankenhooker. Brain Damage is about a young man named Brian who gets a parasite named Aylmer attached to his brainstem. In exchange for getting high off of Aylmer's blue juice, Brian must consume human brains in order to survive. Now, the sample used on this album is taken from a scene in the movie where Brian is trying to detox off of Aylmer's blue juice. And during this detox process, he is having a fever dream where he he begins pulling on this long fiber out of his ear until eventually his ear pops off. This prompts Elmer to say, "Uh-oh, Brian, now you're really losing your mind." And then Brian screams for a very long, exaggerated time. Here is the sample.
Uh-oh, Brian. Now you're really losing your mind. Uh-oh, Brian. Now you're really losing your mind.
Now, I, for one, love a good monster alien movie. It's one of my favorite genres. You put End of the World slapped in there too, and I'm all for it. I'm all ears. So I was very, very excited to watch this movie. It was actually the first film I watched out of the 9 because I knew immediately I wanted to see this. And I was not disappointed. Now, there's a victim in the film who actually is reading a Dead World comic on the toilet before he dies. And I thought that was so cool. Vincent Locke, who does all of Cannibal Corpse's album art, does Dead World. That was his comic book series before he really became like the primary artist for Cannibal Corpse. So being able to see like one of his comic books in this movie is like this kind of Easter egg was really, really cool. I was definitely not expecting that at all. Ending of this film was so weird and so anticlimactic. There may have been a little bit too much cocaine usage. So these last 2 movies are featured in the final track on the album, which is called Festering Fungus Infection. Features a sample from the 1990 film Nightbreeder, which is directed by Clive Barker, and who also did Hellraiser as well as Lord of Illusions. Aaron Boone goes to see a psychiatrist because he is haunted by terrifying nightmares of a city of monsters. But unbeknownst to Boone, the psychiatrist, Dr. Decker, is a serial killer. And when Dr. Decker frames him and gets him killed for a murder he did not commit, he is brought back to life by the Nightbreed, a secret society of monsters living under the town's cemetery, the very same monsters that he's been dreaming about. The sample is taken from this film is one where our protagonist Aaron Boone is in the cemetery and he's interacting with the first few Nightbreed monsters for the first time, and it's quite a good scene. There's a character who's kind of seen as a villain at first who takes a chomp out of him, scares the shit out of him, and the line that they take from this movie is "You mustn't, it's the law." And the evil monster basically says, "Fuck the law." Here's the sample.
You mustn't! It's the law! Fuck the law. You mustn't! It's the law! Fuck the law.
Now, when I tell you that I loved this movie, I loved this movie. Clive Barker really, really, really shines in Nightbreed. So if you've seen Lord of Illusions, you have not seen Nightbreed, you need to see this movie. The absolute pros to this movie is the depth to the story. It's a wonderful romance between our protagonist and his girlfriend. And then there's also an entire civilization of monsters, and the special effects, the outfits, the detail of these monsters in this movie is out of this world. Every monster that we come in contact with in this film has some unique detail that is very special to them. This psychiatrist also wears a mask that predates Slipknot and their mask. So I don't know if Nightbreed actually inspired Slipknot or not. I was looking into it, and there were a lot of articles recently that said that that movie did inspire their most recent masks. So I don't know. Either way, this mask that Dr. Decker wears is freaking scary. And that brings us to the final movie. We're finally at the end. The outro of this album for, again, Festering Fungus Infection features a sample from the 1978 movie Faces of Death. The Faces of Death is directed by John Allen Schwartz, who is known for doing all of the Faces of Death movies. There are multiples. I'm telling you right now, I have not seen any of the other Faces of Deaths, and I have no interest in seeing them. So, this is a mockumentary about a doctor showing various scenes of death during his travels around the world. Some of these scenes include real footage, and some of them are reenactments. Trigger warning, this does feature scenes that involve, death of animals. There's real footage of corpses, real guts. There's real footage of stuff. This is a gore porn type movie, if you can even call it that. There's some very unsettling and awful scenes here, to the point where I actually had to take a break. I had to take a break for a little bit because I was getting really queasy. The sample that is used on this album is from a monologue where the doctor is in a morgue and he's talking about death, essentially. And so here is the sample. I'm just going to play it.
Counting of time is considered a crime, and the money one earned not worth a lone dime. So here they will lie for the rest of the night. Their bodies remain still in darkness and in light. But don't be afraid, for it will happen to you when all will stop as your body turns blue. The counting of time is considered a crime, and the money one earned not worth a lone dime. So here they will lie for the rest of the night. Their bodies remain still in darkness and in light. But don't be afraid, for it will happen to you when all will stop as your body turns blue, 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 as your body turns blue.
Regardless of all the gore, the biggest takeaway was to appreciate the little things in the life that you have and understand that death is just inevitable and it's going to happen. And it's just coming to terms with death and being comfortable with the idea of death. Also, one of my favorite scenes in this movie was actually the plane crash. And I did a little bit of research about it. So I won't necessarily spoil it, but the plane crash scenes were really cool, especially when you know the backstory of that footage and what the history is of that, because it's honestly terrifying. You can tell when scenes are reenacted. That's a complaint. You can tell when they've reenacted certain scenes. But for how old this movie is, they did a really good job, in my opinion, of making things look real. Now you may disagree, obviously, but after I don't know, I felt like it was pretty real in a lot of the aspects. So that is going to do it for today's video on the 9 movies I watched in the Last Days of Humanity's debut, The Sounds of Rancid Juices sloshing around your coffin. So I hope you enjoyed my movie reviews, my movie recs. If you've watched any of these movies, what did you think about them? Did you like any of them? Did you not like any of them? I would love to hear thoughts down below in the comments. Also, if you've heard of this album, if you've listened to this debut album from Last Days of Humanity, let me know down below in the comments as well. And yeah, I'm getting more into these like horror movies. I think they're interesting and they're fun and they're completely out of my wheelhouse, just like Cannibal Corpse was when I first was getting into metal. So I'm excited to jump more into it. If you have any more like horror movie recommendations, always comment them down below. Anything that you think is absolutely essential for a newbie horror movie watcher to have in their watch list, let me know. And even if it's not horror, girl, like I said, I'm at the point of me filming this, I think I'm 33 movies out of 100 right now. So I'm taking suggestions, honestly. But anyway, I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you hanging out with me. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.